big game in the Champions League. Obviously, Sporting Lisbon away in the early kickoff on Tuesday, 5:45 kickoff out in Lisbon. And let's get straight into it, Sim. Obviously, we won our first game. They won their first game against the odds, really, against Frankfurt in Frankfurt, 3-0 on the day, which was quite a surprise for everyone, wasn't it?
A bit, but Frankfurt don't seem to be the same team they were last season. I think they've dropped a few levels, and to be fair, despite winning Europa League, they finished 11th in the Bundesliga, and they've lost their best player in Kostic. So it was a bit of a surprise maybe for the bookies, but I think when it comes to quality of both teams, maybe not a massive surprise, but then again, Lisbon have also lost some good players this summer. So the fact that they've regrouped and had by all accounts, looks like they've had a pretty decent start to the season, including that 3-0 win. You have to say fair play to them, but I think most expecting, the Bundesliga team being at home, especially, you expect them to win, but looks like Lisbon, I was watching the highlights, Lisbon really showed up, and they hit them 3 times and led the way by a former Tottenham boy as well, who was man of the match.
Yeah, Marcus Edwards really getting to grips with things. Obviously, we sold him to Victoria, wasn't it? And he had such a good spell there that Sporting Lisbon, one of the best teams in Portugal, did pick him up, and he's doing really well there. But in terms of Sporting's start to the season, I mean, it hasn't been that great in terms of the other teams. I mean, they're already 8 points behind Benfica. They've let in 8 goals already this season, which shows definitely a leaky defence. Players that they've sold over the summer, Matthias Nunes to Wolves for 40 million. Nuno Mendes, after a loan spell at PSG, he got sold for 35 million. João Palhinha got sold to Fulham, who's made a good start to life there. So some important players being sold by Sporting Lisbon. It's a strange one because every team that we're facing in the Champions League this year is kind of a similar case, isn't it? Yeah,
they've all kind of been stripped of their best talent this summer, and after very promising seasons last season, obviously they finished second last season in the Primeira Liga to Porto, but whether they can sustain that is another question. But it's not going to be an easy game at all.
Of course.
But I think the way they play would probably suit us, because looking at their underlying statistics from their performances, they like to have a lot of possession. They average like over 60% possession in all their games. And they like to attack teams, and especially their front three as well. Marcus Edwards, there's Trincao, who used to play for Wolves. I can't remember who the other one is. Conchalves. They are kind of like tricky, nimble players who like to dribble, like to take people on, but they're not physical. They're not going to trouble you if you're sitting in a low block and they're trying to weave their way through. They like to play within space. And if we restrict them of their space, they're definitely going to be leaving gaps at the back. So if we can definitely have the opportunities to hit them on the counter-attack for sure. And I think the way they play is really going to suit the way we play. So from that perspective, I'm quite encouraged. But if we give them too much encouragement, like maybe we did Marseille in the first half of the game last week, then we could be in trouble, because you don't want to be so back offish. Because I think against Marseille, we just weren't getting their faces enough, we weren't being aggressive enough, we were leaving way too much control to Marseille. So with Lisbon, as long as we keep them at arm's length, but once they get anywhere near our penalty area, we win the ball back quickly and get the ball to our forwards, there should be a lot of space for us to attack.
In terms of where they're ranking in their league this season, in terms of goals per match, they rank 4th in the Premier Liga in Portugal, behind Braga, Porto and Benfica. In terms of goals conceded, they're actually ranking 14th with 1.3 goals conceded per game, which is not great. In terms of possession, they're really high in the possession stats, 2nd in the division with 63.9%, only keeping 3 clean sheets this season, and ranking 4th in expected goals with 9.6. So, I mean, they're not performing in terms of like the best in the league where they want to be. They want to be challenging for the title come the end of the season. Yes, it is early on in the season, so I do think they'll get to grips with things. But I guess it's probably a teething period with losing such big players and bringing in also big players, where in terms of the players that they've brought in, they signed Pedro Porro finally off Man City, which they had him on loan last season, who actually is doing really well there. They got Trincao on loan off Barcelona, who was at Wolves last season. But apart from that, I don't really know many of the players here. Roshinia is another player from Victoria, maybe trying to follow the mould of Marcus Edwards. But if you bring up the graphic of, this is the lineup that they played this weekend, yesterday, in their 4-0 win. Marcus Edwards up front and Roshinia and Trinicao in a front three, which and then in the middle they got Conchalves, and he's actually their danger man. He's tops their tallies for goals, tops their tallies for assists, and seems like a really, really dangerous player from the middle of the park for them.
Yeah, definitely.
4 goals and 3 assists for him, so 7 goal contributions in total. Second after that is Marcus Edwards with 2 goals, 2 assists for them, and then Trinicao is third with 3, which he has, I think, 2 assists and 1 goal.
Yeah, and I think there's already evidence of them starting to get into the season because they've won their last 3 without conceding, scoring 9 goals. So and that's
and maybe
including
it was
the
just teasing
Champions
problems
League.
at the beginning of the season.
They're starting to strut their stuff, it looks like. From what I saw against Frankfurt, despite the fact that Frankfurt lost 3-0, they definitely did have chances. And I believe they had, I think it was a penalty they had, which maybe VAR overturned. But it was kind of a... it was just a case of Frankfurt being the home team, maybe being more open than they usually are against the Lisbon side, and Trincao and Marcus Edwards were definitely able to exploit that. And Marcus Edwards, I have to say, was absolutely phenomenal in that game. From what I saw, he was giving Frankfurt no end of problems. He was he threatened to score a few times before he eventually did, and he actually set up a goal for Trincao as well. So he seems to be playing fairly well. I don't know how he's doing on a week basis in the Premier League, but in the first game of the Champions League he seems to be playing really well.
2 goals, 2 assists ain't bad for this stage of the season.
Which is pretty good. So obviously they got danger men, and we know from him that he's got supreme quality if you allow him. If you're not aggressive up against him and you allow him space and time, he's got a really good left foot, and his dribbling ability, that close control, is very difficult to deal with. But as long as we're compact as we usually are, well, we know how Conte always likes to play, I think that we should be all right with limiting him. And it's all right. It's all about what we're going to do when we have the ball. And it's going to be interesting to see if we allow Porto to dominate the possession that they usually have, or if they're going to play a different game to try and frustrate us and we are going to have more possession. Because if I was them, that's what I would try and do. Try and lure us out and then try and get Edwards and Trincao as much space as possible. But I kind of get the feeling that that's not going to happen. I think we're going to sit a bit deeper again. We're going to restrict them the space, and then we're going to try and draw them out just because that's their natural game.
And that will kind of play into our hands a bit more than maybe the way it planned out against Marseille. I know we got the win against Marseille in the end, but it was a very hard-fought victory, and it didn't look great at times. Do you think the way maybe Sporting play their football will play into our hands just that bit more?
Yeah, I do. In essence, the way Marseille plays should have as well, because they also like to kind of have possession and dominate, but they play a kind of a different formation. They play with unlike Lisbon, they both play 3 at the back, but they like to play. They both play 3 at the back. Marseille played with 3 down in the centre, so they could outnumber us in possession. That was a bit different. But when it comes to Lisbon, they play fairly similar formation to us, and that should really help in the sense that they shouldn't be able to dominate us through in the middle. It should be man for man, and that's where we really benefit, I think. So I think Lisbon should play into our hands. Really, that's what I'm hoping for. It's just about whether we're as defensively solid as we have been, and if we are, I think we'll be okay.
Yeah, and if we do win this game already, 2 games in, we've put ourselves in an extremely strong position in this group, haven't we? 2 wins from 2.
Yeah, even in a draw, I think we're in a good position. So that wouldn't be a terrible result. And I think historically we don't have the best record away in Europe. So I don't think a draw should be sniffed at. But obviously, I wouldn't take one now. I think we're good enough to go then and win. If we do that, then yeah, we're in a very strong position. 2 very difficult games out of the way, and then a double header against Frankfurt to come.
Yeah, and with Marcus Edwards, obviously he got shunned by Spurs how many years ago now? About 3-4 years ago, maybe a bit longer than that.
since 2018 potentially.
I mean, he's definitely going to look at this game with a point to prove.
Definitely.
He's going to want to, look at those Tottenham that kind of we released him in the end, didn't we? Because he just apparently there was an attitude problem or something like that on the back of Pochettino really bigging him up at times, calling him mini Messi and stuff like that. Whether you agree with that, or whether you don't,
He admitted it was a mistake to do that.
Yeah, and I think it was a mistake. Putting a lot of pressure on his young shoulders at that age. He's definitely, he seems to have grown up a bit, seems to have really knuckled down as a professional footballer now, and he's definitely going to have a point to prove.
And we even saw that. I remember they played Arsenal in Europa, not Lisbon. He was at Victoria, and they played Arsenal in Europa League, and he got a goal, really nice goal as well, and he clearly had a point to prove in that game. So for sure, he's going to be the danger man. I think him playing in a false nine helps us a bit, because I don't think he's going to be as effective as maybe if he had a bit of space out wide and he had to pull maybe one of our centre backs into a wider position and threaten them. If he's going to be a false nine, I think that him coming deeper, that's where you want him. You don't want him as close to goal, so that should help us. But definitely, he's going to have his tail up. Definitely, he's going to. This is probably his biggest game of his career, I would say at this point. This is going to be a massive game for him. Especially coming against his old club. Is
it a worry for you, someone like Marcus Edwards, who's really nimble on his feet, very small, by the way? Does it worry you that maybe if he gets in a one-on-one with Eric Dyer, and Eric Dyer sometimes when he's pushing up, he really doesn't command himself. Does it worry you with how fast Edwards can be to turn Dyer like that in those positions?
Yeah, it does, but I think what we've seen a lot of the time is that the Dyer isn't great in one-on-one situations, which is why he's not very good in a back four. But that's why we have a back three, is because we don't have him in too many one-on-one situations. So if he is, if Dyer up one-on-one against a lot of attackers with a lot of pace and mobility, when he's being run at, is a worry. But we're not in that scenario very often, and so I'm not too worried about that being the case, because he's got two other defensive defenders around him and two centre mids as well. So even in the cases this season where he's actually been exposed for those things, we've had the defenders to cover, thankfully, and it hasn't cost us too much. And if we were playing in a back four, he would be absolute toast, in my opinion. So I think from that sense, as we just hope that he doesn't get isolated, but I'm confident he won't be, because that's how we play. We don't isolate our centre backs, especially the centre one. So it shouldn't be too much a worry for me. But if it does happen, especially for example, if we happen to be chasing a game in the second half and we do have to throw caution to the wind, that's when they're going to get some joy. But hopefully that situation doesn't arise.
Yeah, and Romero will be thriving or looking forward to a matchup like him against Marcus Edwards, because it's a matchup where he can really impose his physical dominance against someone like Marcus Edwards.
Yeah, and I think he'll thrive out of that, being able to be as aggressive as he can. I think when he's physically dominant against your position, that's when he's at his absolute best. I think when the problems Romero has is when he tries to be super aggressive against attackers who are actually his physical match or even superior, because then all of a sudden he can bounce off them and then we're in trouble.
Saw that a couple of times with players like Antonio in the past.
Yeah, exactly. So I think against these kind of attackers where he can absolutely bully them, that's when he can allow himself to be super aggressive, because he can just get ahead of them. He can shove them off balance. He can get the upper hand, and then he's really difficult to deal with and get around. So I think these are the kind of attackers he thrives against playing, and I don't think on his side they're going to get a look in, honestly, if he's playing.
Yeah, I agree.
And hopefully Longley, I'm sure Longley, given the fact that the City game was cancelled on the weekend, I'm going to assume he's not going to look to rotate too much. So I'm going to think he's going to play a very similar team, I reckon.
Yeah, but how much of an advantage is that for us now that the City game's been postponed, had a week or more or less a week to prepare for this game? Is it an advantage?
Yeah, of course it is, because we've had a week to prepare. City game was cancelled last minute, so I doubt we were preparing for Lisbon on Friday.
That's what I'm saying. Is it an advantage or is it a disruption to preparations?
I think it's an advantage to the fact we've had a week rest. 100%. We've seen it so many times, even last season, how having a whole week to either prepare or to rest for one game is a massive advantage. But it's not going to be such a massive advantage where like we're now guaranteed to win. Obviously, you still have to earn it, and these are professional footballers. They can play 2 games or 3 games in a week or whatever it is. So it's not going to be like something that's going to be massively tangible, but it definitely gives us a bit of an upper hand, and especially with Conte talking about how worried he was playing 3 games in 6 days, which must have been a bit of a worry for him. I think the fact that the City game was cancelled in the short term probably does allow us a bit more time to refresh, and we've known that performances haven't been amazing, weren't amazing of late, apart from the Fulham game. So hopefully we can be as fresh as possible going into Tuesday, and I think the fact that we have the game was cancelled should allow us to do that. It should be an advantage. I don't see it as a disruption for sure, especially with Lisbon playing yesterday. So that should definitely help us, but it's not something that you can say that's the reason we're going to win. But it definitely helps.
And in terms of other personnel in the squad, Perisic, the front 3. Obviously, I think we go with Perisic, right, with this game?
Yeah, I think so. I don't see any reason not to. I think we're going to probably go unchanged, I would assume. And it'll be
It's such unfair on Kulusevski once again. Because he's been playing so well. You can argue he's been playing better than Richarlison. You can argue maybe not better than Kane with the returns he's got, but you could definitely argue he's been better than Sonny, that's for sure. I don't even think it's an argument that he's been better than Sonny. I think it's just clear facts. How unfair is it on Kulu to keep missing out like this? It will be the 3rd game in a row, won't it?
Yeah, it will be. And I'm sure he won't be happy about it. And maybe he will. Look, it's not even beyond the realms of possibility he will play. Maybe he will give Son a rest, seeing as the City game was a big one and we didn't even play it. So maybe this is a good time to give Sonny time on the bench. But maybe the fact as well that we've not played since Wednesday, maybe that would also help Sonny. So I think knowing Conte, knowing how much he trusts and relies on those 2 big players, I do think he's going to find it very difficult to leave them out. However bad decision or what, if you disagree with it or not, I do think he's going to find it difficult to leave them out if he doesn't have to. So
surely he has to leave Son out at some point. Everyone's going to have to rest, even Kane.
Yeah, I agree, but right now maybe it's not the time. We've just had a week break, so why do we have to leave him out? I mean, form-wise, you'd argue maybe, but I think maybe this also could be a very good game for him as well, because with the way Sporting play, he could have some chances. So I just suspect it's going to be another unlucky game for Kulusevski, but maybe he comes in on the weekend. That's why I reckon he goes unchanged. That's just my prediction.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you there. All right, well, in terms of the game, it is on. We had a bit of a scare this morning as Spurs on their website, it said Sporting Lisbon v Tottenham postponed, but it was an error. It was left over from the Man City game last week. They did confirm that the game is on as of now anyway. Anything can happen in the next 24 hours.
They can't cancel it. They can't.
Yeah, I mean, I find it very difficult to see them cancelling, because if they cancel it, I think that automatically awards 3 points straight to Sporting. So it'll be disastrous, to be honest.
They're not going to cancel it unless they got the UEFA go-ahead. They're not going to do that. That would be stupid. That would just be idiotic.
Would be idiotic. But look, the game is going ahead. In terms of score predictions, what are you going for?
I think we're going to win with a clean sheet. That's what I'm hoping for. I reckon Sporting are going to huff and puff, but they're not going to be able to blow our house down. And I think that Spurs should be able to exploit the space that Sporting leave in their own half through our brilliant attackers. So I'm going to go with a 2-0 win.
2-0?
Yeah.
Interesting. I think that... I think they will, with their home crowd, I think they will get a goal from somewhere. I think Marcus Edwards maybe can creep round the back of Dyer or something like that. And I think it'll be a difficult game, especially with the Lisbon crowd behind them. Spurs, historically, not being the greatest team away from home in Europe. But still, I am going for a Spurs win, but I think it'll be a very tight game, and I'm going for 2-1 to Spurs, and hopefully Sonny to get back in the score sheet, because I think everyone's just praying that Sonny does get back on the score sheet, because we know that once Sonny hits the back of the net, he's not going to stop. He's not going to stop, and he's going to get back to his best. So I'm going for 2-1. My brother's going for 2-0. Let me know your score predictions in the comments section below. And that is your match preview for Game 2 of the Champions League.